Hey guys, video with a very simple but absolutely fundamental basic principle of chess psychology that I just want to share with you quickly now. I've got two games that exemplify this, both games that I've played today, and the principle that we're looking at is never take your eye off what your opponent is doing, right? Even when you think you've got something really cool lined up, right? It doesn't count if your opponent has a counter for it or checkmates you first or whatever, for example. So I'm going to show you two awesome examples that happened today. Two quick games. So the first one is with a friend and follower, Jason Colquhoun. We played this one earlier today. He was trying to challenge me for a game for a while. So this is interesting because I'm playing white and I've got the French. So he plays e6 on the first move and then d5, and I play the advanced variation. Now bishop to e7 I think is maybe inaccurate for the French, because what you'll normally want to do is to play c5 and just wait for your opponent to take that pawn, and if they do, you get to develop your bishop recapture for free. So I'm not sure of the point of this particular move. But then we have knight to f3, c5 is played, good. I like to play c3. I think more normal moves is like knight out to d2. Knight develops, bishop develops, pawn to b6, bishop comes out, pinning the knight, kicked away once, kicked away twice, and comes back down to c2, which is quite a comfortable square for the bishop. I was kind of expecting it to end up there anyway. So what we have is black having a lot of space now on the queen side. And normally in the French, black tries to attack on the queen side while white tries to attack on the king side. And we'll see what happens. So pawn pushes again. I just bring my knight out. I'm unconcerned about this trade. I just recapture with the b pawn. And that's what happens. Then I castle. So feeling fairly comfortable. And this means that we've got, this pawn advance means we've got quite a blockade in the middle of the board. So, which side of the blockade are we going to end up with our pieces on? So bishop comes out again, queen comes out to harass the bishop, but my queen's guarding it anyway. And I just move my queen off the back rank to connect my rooks. And now the bishop goes back to f8. Clearly to, I'm guessing, to defend the g7 square. So I bring my knight in. I'm going to start attacking on this side of the board. Comes out, and then I grab black's knight. So I'm figuring that with these log jam of pawns in the middle of the board, that knights are going to have more fun than bishops in the rest of this game. He recaptures, and now very simple tactic. It's tactics, guys, that win chess games. Tactics win games. Two attackers, one defender, no trouble. So the rook can't capture because the queen would then take the rook. So black interposes a knight, blocking the defense of the knight, but that's okay. I just grab the other bishop. So this bishop looks like it could be quite useful. It's got a nice long diagonal there. I just grab the bishop, and now black cannot castle. So time to bring my remaining pieces up towards where the action's going to be. Bring my queen back down. We exchange a knight for a bishop. That's absolutely fine. So now I'm feeling okay at this point. I think my knight has got some scope, and I've definitely got better king safety. Middle of the board is pretty much even. Bishop comes back. I bring my knight in. Queen comes back, addressing the knight, but it's not in any danger. And now clearly the next tactic that I've got lined up here, can you see it? Would be knight captures on e6, because the defender of e6, there is only one defender, and it's the pawn on f7, and the pawn on f7 is currently pinned because the queen would otherwise have the king in check. Okay, so that's the tactic. Black spots the tactic and moves the king out of line, thereby unpinning this pawn, starting to get the king towards more safety. I bring my knight back around, and now we start looking maybe towards the queen side. Black now pushes f6, and we exchange pawns. So now my queen starts to have a probe down on the queen side of the board. This pawn is undefended, and there's no dark squared bishop now. So the queen comes out defending the pawn. Now clearly I've got to be pretty careful here. I can't necessarily just drop my rook onto there, because if queen takes and rook takes and then rook takes, the only way to stop it would be queen to c1 or knight to e1, and either way they would be captured. So I have got to be slightly aware of potential background. So of course I don't have to capture the queen or the rook. I could capture the queen and then decline the rook. So anyway, bring my rook out where it's in line with this rearmost pawn in the pawn chain. Queen comes back, proposing an exchange of queens. I don't like the idea of that, so I'm going to put the king in check, and now bringing the queen back round again. So you see we're dodging around each other and dueling a bit here, and it's a very even game. I'm one pawn up, that's all. So now I advance a pawn, so I'm giving my king an escape square there, but also of course here we've got the risk of queen takes h2, and if my knight ever moves, my knight's the only defender of that square. So I'm just blocking that idea. Rook comes around, and here I spot a wonderful tactic. Okay, and this is what I want to bring your attention to in this game. I was getting very excited before this rook came across, right? I've got this idea, and it starts with spotting that the king and the queen are one square apart diagonally. And when you have two valuable pieces, one square apart diagonally, that's begging for a knight fork. Okay, it's just one of the arrangements of pieces that where a knight can attack the both of them. Now, the other thing I notice is that Mr. Pawn on e6 is currently pinned by my rook, because the king is back on here. So what I'm thinking is, hey look, knight to there, then knight to there, bang, bang, double hit, king and queen, and the pawn can't capture because it's pinned, right? Brilliant. So I've got this guy. I've got him over a barrel. So he brings his rook to there. Okay, no great threat. So I put my knight on h4, getting ready to drop in there and just mic drop moment, yeah? What have I missed? In my excitement about carrying out my brilliant idea, my game-winning idea, I have missed the next move. Rook takes knight. Okay, it's the exact same thing. The only defender of that knight was the pawn on g3, and the pawn on g3 is pinned to my king. So black just did exactly, to me, what I was about to do to him. But he spotted it, and I didn't. So well done on that. In the end, the game came out pretty even, and I was able to win towards the end on time, but that was a very, very good move on black's part, very well spotted, and there you go. It made me feel a bit stupid, but it just goes to show it doesn't matter how brilliant you think your idea is, right? I was one step away from a winning move, but it doesn't matter because now I can't, I'm still one step away. I didn't get to execute my move because I did something silly. So there you go. Right, let's look at another game. So in this one, this is one I've just played against a player rated just under 1400, and it's a 15 plus 10 rapid game. Okay, so I've got the white pieces again. I start with e4, and we have another French defence. d4, and now b6, which is an unusual line, which I've never played it and very rarely seen it, I think. So I bring my knight out. Bishop comes out to attack this pawn. Knight comes out to defend that pawn. And now bishop comes out to b4. Okay. Now, how many times have we seen this kind of position? Now, for some reason, I've just been out on a lovely long walk, got very, very cold and lots of fresh air, and maybe I'm a bit dopey, but I allowed one of the most simple and straightforward tactics to be used against me on this occasion. And I thought, this is no great stress. I'll just break the pin with my bishop, right? This knight is the only defender of that pawn, right? So all black does is simply takes the knight, I recapture, and then takes the pawn with his bishop. So he's a pawn up already. Now, so I come back with my bishop, offering to trade. He's not interested. He just develops a piece to defend it, which is very good. We both castle. I bring my rook across to e1, and the bishop retreats to its little fianchetto hole up in the top of the queen side. Now, so I decide to occupy the e5 square with a knight. It's a very nice, comfy square for a knight. Black doesn't like that idea, so he tries to chase it away. But I think this is okay. I can always defend with my rook. And I've even got ideas of maybe putting my queen up, double up my rooks on here, maybe even bring a rook around, swing it round to g3. Black captures, and I decide in this instance to recapture with the pawn, not the rook. I thought the pawn looked better, partly because it's going to kick this knight away from its nice defensive position, that post on f6. So the knight has to move away, goes into the middle of the board, and now this is looking pretty good. I've got these two nice bishops now looking down towards black's king, so that's not too bad. So I lift my queen up to d2, and black decides to trade his knight for my dark square bishop, fair enough, and the queen comes out. So clearly that's when your alarm bells have to go off. There is a risk of mate in 1. We can't have that. So I lift my bishop comes up here, defending that square and also putting the question to black's bishop, are we going to trade? Black says no, we're not, and pushes the c6 pawn instead. Now I take the opportunity to double up on my rooks, and we have f5, kicking the bishop. Bishop comes back here, could equally have come back here, but I thought that I still have ideas of bringing my rook around, so I didn't want to put the bishop in the way of that. Now the pawn pushes down further. Do I have to be worried about this? No, I just push f3 and block it. This is now making life very difficult for this bishop, which was looking very dangerous up there in the corner. Pushes c5, removing one of the obstacles, but it's only part of it. However, at this point in time, still, bishop takes f3 would fall to the same trick that we saw in the previous video, in the previous game, which is that the only defender of the pawn is currently pinned. Okay, so we've got to do something about that. So I put my bishop back, and now we do exchange bishops. Now, black decides to launch another offensive down the h file with his h pawn, and I figure that I spot a soft spot in black's camp as well. So I move my queen down to here, and I do like to look out for moves where it looks as though I'm doing one thing, but in fact I'm doing another. And this is one of those, for example. So it almost looks like I'm maybe pointing towards black's queen, but in actual fact I'm targeting the d7 pawn. Now at this point, I think that black maybe got a bit carried away with his own idea. So what is his idea? His idea is to push h4 and then h3, and then simply checkmate with the queen. But the pawn cannot capture on h3, and if the pawn moves forward, he's got takes, and could have me in a lot of trouble with this pair of pawns that are flanking the queen. However, in his excitement about his own clever idea, he missed that I had a very, very good defense. So he goes ahead and pushes h4, thinking, my opponent can't do anything in time, right? I've got this. It's an unstoppable attack. Well, it isn't, because queen takes d7, and can you see the next move from white as well, which completely not only wins material, but defuses this plan of black's, right? So he pushes again, thinking, look, I've got mate in 1 now, but it doesn't matter if you've got mate in 1. If your opponent can check you, capture a pawn, put you in check, you have to block the check or move, and then grabs the pawn. So now I'm 2 pawns in front, and the rest of the game is a relative formality. So I'm pushing through. We've now got this pawn's looking pretty isolated. I just need to defend, try and improve my queen, grab the pawn, and we end up swapping off queens. I drop one pawn there, but it's all going to finish fairly straightforward because I've got this nice pawn on the f-file that I just need to convert. So nice little bit. Let's just watch this end game as well. So I move my king behind my pawn, so it's in opposition. Now, if these other pawns weren't on the board, black could now force a draw by pretty much staying in front of this pawn, okay, and ending up in this exact same format but on the back rank where it would actually be stalemate. Okay, so that's what you have to go for if you're trying to defend against the king and a pawn. Now, but because we have these other pawns, we can go into this routine. So you see from here, black obviously his only other move is to advance the b pawn, and that's going to be very bad. So, but from here, because my king is covering these two squares and my pawn is covering these two, the black king is forced to retreat, and when he retreats I move up, still in opposition, that's two squares apart in line with each other, comes back, push the pawn, right, and now I make a break for capturing these pawns, and now black is forced to resign because there's really no way that he can stop king to there and just shepherd the pawn up and get a queen and win, especially still with 16 minutes on the clock from a 15+10 game. So there you go, two really interesting examples of the same thing. It's a case of thinking that you've got a great attack and that you just can't wait to roll out your attack. Well, you should always take time, always stop, always look. What has my opponent got? What, and particularly, almost the most important thing, what did my opponent just move and why did he do that? Right? What has changed on the board with that move? Okay, you can literally save games that way. I just blundered a knight in the previous game. In this example, my opponent gave away two pawns for no, which he didn't have to do. He could have quite easily have defended all that material and thought about his attack later. So attacks are great. Killer attacks are wonderful, but they're no good if you don't get to execute them. Okay, if your opponent can land that first punch while you're gearing up for your big knockout blow, then it could be you that ends up on the losing side. So just a useful lesson that I thought, I've been on both sides of it today, thought I'd share it with you. Thank you for watching. If you are not a subscriber to Chess Bootcamp, please do subscribe now and keep on top of all the information that we bring out. Other than that, thanks for your time. I'll see you very soon.